Scottish Secrets Chapter 1: The Highlands Beckon. Finn had always been drawn to the wild, rugged landscapes of Scotland, but the Highlands were something different. This was no day hike or gentle stroll through the woods. This was the untamed, the ancient, where the hills themselves seemed to breathe with history. He had been planning this solo trip for months, eager to lose himself in the winding paths and hidden valleys of the Cairngorms. The morning was crisp, with a chill in the air that sharpened his senses. Finn shouldered his pack and set off, the rhythmic crunch of his boots against the path his only companion. As the hours passed, the world around him grew more isolated, more primal. Vast expanses of heather stretched out in every direction, the peaks rising like old gods watching over the land. He marveled at the silence, broken only by the distant cry of a bird. By late afternoon, Finn found himself deep in the heart of the Highlands. His map showed a bothy, a simple shelter for travelers, somewhere up ahead, though it wasn't marked as inhabited. The thought of a roof over his head for the night was appealing, as the clouds above hinted at rain. When he reached it, the bothy was as abandoned as he expected, but it looked far older than the ones he had read about. The stone walls were weathered, the windows empty sockets, yet something about it called to him. Pushing the heavy wooden door open, Finn stepped inside. Dust motes danced in the last rays of the sun, and the air was thick with the scent of damp stone and decay. He set his pack down and began to explore. The first room was simple enough, with a stone hearth long since cold and a few old wooden benches pushed against the wall. It was in the next room, though, that he found something unexpected. The walls were covered in strange markings, glyphs, and symbols carved deep into the stone. Finn's breath caught in his throat. He had never seen anything like them before. They weren't Celtic, Viking, or Pictish, nothing like what he had learned in his history books. They were foreign, almost otherworldly, as if written in a language no one had ever spoken. His heart quickened with excitement. This wasn't just an old shelter. This was something ancient, something forgotten. He pulled out his phone to snap a few photos, but his screen flickered and died. Frowning, he checked the battery, half full, no reason for it to shut off. The air in the room felt heavier, oppressive even. The symbols seemed to glow faintly in the fading light, or was that just his imagination? Finn stepped closer, running his fingers over the carvings. As his hand passed over one particularly intricate glyph, a strange sensation surged through him, like static electricity buzzing beneath his skin. Suddenly, the room grew darker, though he hadn't noticed the sun setting outside. A low hum filled his ears, and for the first time, Finn felt a flicker of unease. What had he stumbled upon? Chapter 2: The Whispering Walls. Finn stumbled back, his pulse racing. The air in the room seemed to shift, and he swore the carvings moved with it, as if alive. He tried to steady himself, forcing logic to take hold. These were just old symbols, likely made by a forgotten culture, nothing more. But the strange glow and the oppressive atmosphere made his skin crawl. He fumbled in his pack for a flashlight, clicked it on, and swept the beam across the walls. The glyphs shimmered in the light, almost pulsing, as if they were trying to communicate. Finn's breath caught. It wasn't just his imagination, there was something unnatural about this place. Suddenly, a low whisper filled the room. It was faint, like wind slipping through cracks in the stone, but there was no breeze. The whisper grew louder, forming words in a language he didn't recognize. Finn felt a wave of nausea, his mind reeling, as if it were being pulled in two directions at once. Then, silence. He staggered to the doorway, heart hammering. His instincts screamed for him to leave, but something inside urged him to stay, to understand. This wasn't just a shelter, it was a gateway, a threshold between worlds, and he had just crossed into something he couldn't explain. Finn took a deep breath, trying to calm his nerves. Maybe it was just the isolation getting to him. He'd been hiking all day, and fatigue could play tricks on the mind. Still, those symbols. He couldn't shake the feeling that they were meant for him, or someone like him, someone curious enough to explore what others had long since abandoned. Suddenly, his flashlight flickered, plunging the room into darkness. He cursed under his breath and slapped it against his hand. The light sputtered back on, but in the brief moment of darkness, something had changed. The room felt smaller, the walls closer. Finn's pulse quickened as he turned, shining the beam toward the far corner. There, in the shadows, stood a figure, a faint silhouette, barely more than a shimmer in the air. "Who's there?" Finn's voice echoed in the room, but no answer came. The figure didn't move, didn't speak. It was as if it was waiting. Finn's heart raced, but instead of fear, he felt a strange compulsion, an urge to step closer. His mind screamed at him to run, but his legs carried him forward. When he was just a foot away from the figure, it dissolved into mist, leaving behind only the cold stone wall and the whisper of the wind. Something told him this adventure had only just begun. Chapter 3: Into the Unknown. The mist that once formed the figure swirled around Finn, dissipating into the air. For a moment, he stood frozen, his mind struggling to process what had just happened. His heart raced and his muscles tensed, ready to bolt out of the bothy and back into the familiar safety of the wilderness. But the pull, the same inexplicable compulsion that had driven him deeper into the room, kept him rooted in place. He couldn't just leave, not yet. Finn turned back to the wall, where the glyphs seemed to pulse more faintly now, their strange glow receding into the stone. Whatever force had been at work here, it wasn't done with him yet. He stepped forward and ran his fingers across the cold carvings once more. This time, there was no shock, no surge of energy. But as his fingers traced the edges of the symbols, something else happened. The wall shifted. At first, it was a small tremor, so subtle Finn thought it might have been his imagination. But then the stone began to part, creaking open like an ancient door, revealing a hidden passageway behind it. Finn's breath hitched in his throat. The narrow tunnel was pitch black, with only the faintest hint of air moving from within. "Okay, Finn," he muttered to himself, "this is probably where you turn around and forget you ever saw any of this." But he didn't. He knew he wouldn't. There was a part of him that had always longed for adventure, for something beyond the ordinary. This was it. Whatever this was, it was calling to him. He clicked the flashlight back on and stepped into the passage. The air inside was cold, much colder than outside, and damp. The walls were lined with the same strange glyphs, though they were more worn here, as if time had almost erased them. The passage twisted and turned, and Finn followed, his footsteps echoing softly in the narrow space. After what felt like an eternity, the passage opened into a larger chamber. His flashlight beam swept across the room, revealing an ancient underground space, carved from the rock. In the center stood a stone pedestal, and on top of it lay a large, weathered object, a book, or at least something that resembled one. Its cover was made of some kind of strange, dark material, not leather, not wood. The symbols from the walls adorned its surface, but these were sharper, more intricate. Finn approached cautiously, feeling the weight of history pressing down on him. He reached out, hesitating only a moment before touching the object. The moment his fingers made contact, a surge of warmth shot through his body, different from the shock he had felt earlier. This was comforting, like a welcome embrace. He lifted the book from the pedestal. It was heavy, and as he opened it, the pages inside were filled with more symbols, similar to the ones on the walls. He couldn't read them, but there was a strange familiarity to them, as if they were speaking to him on a level deeper than language. Suddenly, a voice echoed in the chamber. It was soft, barely more than a whisper, but Finn could hear it clearly. "You have found what was hidden. Now you must decide." "Decide?" Finn asked aloud, his voice trembling. "To seek the truth, or to leave it buried?" The voice was calm, neither threatening nor welcoming, but it sent a chill down his spine. Finn glanced down at the book in his hands. It felt alive. Something ancient and powerful had been locked away here, and he had disturbed it. "Who are you?" Finn asked, his voice cracking slightly. "We are the guardians of the lost knowledge," the voice replied. "For centuries we have kept it hidden, awaiting one who would come seeking answers." Finn's mind raced. Lost knowledge? Guardians? The carvings, the strange figure in the chamber? It all seemed too surreal, like something out of a legend. But here he was, standing in the middle of it. "What is this place?" he asked, his voice steadier now. "This is the threshold to what has been forgotten," the voice said. "Long ago, this land was not as you know it. There were those who understood the deeper powers of the earth, the stars, and the mind. They left these symbols as a key, a way to unlock what they once knew." Finn stared at the book in his hands, And this will tell me everything? It will show you the path, the voice said. But the knowledge is dangerous. Once you begin, there is no going back. Finn's heart pounded in his chest. He had come here for an adventure, but this was far more than he had ever bargained for. He had a choice: leave now, forget everything, or take the book and see where it led him. He thought of the stories he had always loved growing up, of heroes and explorers who stumbled upon ancient mysteries and uncovered hidden truths. They had always seemed so distant, so fictional. But now, standing at the crossroads of his own story, Finn realized something. He didn't want to go back. "I'll take it," Finn said, his voice resolute. "I'll seek the truth." The chamber grew still, and the voice fell silent. The weight of his decision settled over him, but there was no turning back now. Finn tucked the ancient book into his pack, his mind buzzing with questions and anticipation. As he made his way back through the passage and into the night, the glyphs on the walls pulsed one last time, as if bidding him farewell or welcoming him into something far greater than he could ever imagine. The adventure had only just begun. Chapter 4: The Key to the Forgotten World. The night had fully descended by the time Finn emerged from the hidden passage. The air outside was heavy with moisture, and the low growl of distant thunder echoed across the highlands. His heart was still pounding from the experience underground, but the cool breeze calmed his nerves somewhat. He glanced back at the bothy, now just a shadow against the darkening sky, and felt a strange sense of finality. Whatever secrets the bothy held, Finn was carrying them with him now. The ancient book was tucked securely in his pack, its weight a constant reminder of the choice he had made. He hadn't heard the voice again, but he could feel its presence lingering in the back of his mind, as if the very land itself was watching him. He set off down the path, his flashlight guiding the way. The familiar crunch of his boots against the gravel reassured him, but every so often he'd glance behind him, half expecting to see the shimmering figure from earlier. Each time, there was nothing but darkness and the occasional rustle of the wind through the heather. After an hour of walking, he found a small clearing where he could set up camp. His tent was up in minutes, and soon he was sitting by a small fire, the warmth chasing away the cold that had settled deep into his bones. The book sat beside him, untouched since he had left the chamber. He stared at it, feeling both drawn to and repelled by its presence. What would happen if he opened it again? Would the voice return? Would he understand more of the strange glyphs inside? His hand hovered over the cover, but something in him hesitated. Then, without warning, a flash of light illuminated the clearing, followed by a deafening crack of thunder. The storm was closer than he had realized. The wind picked up, whipping through the trees with a force that rattled his tent. Finn scrambled to secure the flaps, but as he did, he noticed something strange. The book had fallen open. Its pages fluttered wildly in the wind, but one in particular had been revealed, glowing faintly in the firelight. He knelt beside it, heart pounding once again. The symbols on this page were different from the others he had seen. They were more complex, more vibrant, as if they were written in layers. As he stared at them, his vision seemed to blur, and the edges of the page began to shimmer. Without thinking, he placed his hand over the symbols. The world shifted. The wind stopped. The fire, once crackling loudly, now burned in eerie silence. Finn blinked and looked around. The clearing was still there, but everything felt wrong. The colors of the trees, the sky, even the earth beneath him were muted, like he was seeing everything through a thin veil. "What is this?" he whispered to himself. A voice answered, not the one from the bothy, but something softer, almost melodic. "You have entered the between, the world as it is and the world as it was." Finn jumped to his feet, scanning the clearing. There was no one there, but the voice surrounded him. "The between?" he asked, his voice trembling. "You are close to the truth now," the voice continued. "The symbols you carry, they are a key to unlocking what has been lost. But be warned, young seeker. You are not the only one who searches for the old ways." Finn swallowed hard. "What do you mean? Who else is looking for this?" A low hum filled the air, and from the corner of his eye he saw something move. A shadow, tall and thin, standing at the edge of the clearing. His blood ran cold. It wasn't like the shimmering figure from the bothy. This was something darker, more menacing. Its form was barely human, its outline flickering as if it were struggling to stay within this world. The voice spoke again, urgent now. You must leave this place. The Between is not safe. It is a crossroads where old powers linger and new threats emerge. Take the book, Finn, and go. Finn didn't need to be told twice. He grabbed the ancient tome, shoved it into his pack, and extinguished the fire. The storm was upon him now, rain falling in sheets. But it didn't matter. He had to move, and fast. He raced down the path, the shadowy figure still lingering in his mind. What had he gotten himself into? What were these powers the voice had warned him about? His thoughts spiraled as he ran, barely noticing the landscape shifting around him, the world blurring between reality and whatever strange realm he had stumbled upon. Finally, after what felt like hours, Finn reached the edge of the woods. The storm had passed, and the sky above was clear, stars twinkling innocently as if nothing had happened. He collapsed against a large boulder, panting, his muscles burning from the sprint. The book. He had to understand it. Whatever it contained, it held the answers to the mysteries that were unfolding around him. But it wasn't just a curiosity anymore, it was a matter of survival. Finn looked out at the horizon, the distant peaks of the highlands glowing faintly in the moonlight. Somewhere out there, ancient forces were stirring, and he had become a part of it. He couldn't turn back now. He wouldn't. Chapter 5. The Path of Secrets. The following day, Finn found himself drawn towards a remote village nestled deep in the valleys. His boots were caked with mud, and his body ached from the relentless hike, but something pulled him toward this place. Perhaps it was the voice's warning? Or maybe it was the feeling that whatever answers he sought lay ahead, not behind. The village was small, with stone cottages that looked as old as the hills themselves. As he walked through the narrow streets, he noticed the eyes of the locals on him, their gazes sharp, watchful, as if they knew something he didn't. There was no welcome here, only suspicion. He approached the village inn, hoping to find rest and maybe, just maybe, someone who could shed light on what he had discovered. The innkeeper was an older man, his face lined with the wrinkles of a hard life, but there was a knowing look in his eyes when he saw Finn approach. "You've been to the bothy, haven't you?" the man asked before Finn could say a word. Finn's breath caught. "How do you know?" The innkeeper's eyes darkened. "That place is not for the living to disturb. You've touched something ancient, something that hasn't been awakened for centuries." Finn felt a chill run down his spine. "What do you know about it?" The innkeeper leaned in closer, his voice a low whisper. "I know this. Whatever you've taken from that place, it doesn't belong to you. And if you don't find a way to put it back, there are those who will come looking." Finn's hand instinctively moved toward his pack, where the book lay hidden. He had thought this was just the beginning of an adventure, but now it seemed more like a race against time. And something told him time was running out. The innkeeper's words lingered in the air, thick with warning. Finn swallowed hard, suddenly feeling the full weight of the book in his pack. It had been calling to him since the moment he found it, yet now the thrill of discovery was rapidly being overshadowed by the creeping sense of danger. "You're not the first to stumble upon the bothy," the innkeeper continued, his voice low and gravelly. "But you might be the last. Those that came before, well, let's just say they were never the same afterward." Finn's mind raced. Others had been here before? Who were they? What happened to them? The innkeeper straightened, a shadow crossing his face. Most disappeared. A few returned, but with madness in their eyes. Rambled on about ancient powers, about the Between and those that guard its secrets. "You can't toy with these things, lad. They belong to another time, another world." Finn leaned forward, lowering his voice. "I need to know more. I don't think I can just leave it. I need to understand what I've found." The innkeeper sighed deeply, his gaze fixed on the floor. "It's not just what you found, lad. It's what's found you. That book? It's more than just old knowledge. It's a key, a map, and a curse all wrapped into one. And now that you've taken it, there are those who will be coming for it." Finn's heart raced, the innkeeper's words settling like cold iron in his chest. "Who are they?" The old man's eyes darkened. "The Watchers. Those who have kept the secrets of the ancient world hidden, guarding them from the likes of you and me. They know when someone disturbs the old places, and they don't take kindly to it. They'll be looking for you soon enough. Finn stood up abruptly, anxiety creeping into his limbs. Then what do I do? How do I stop them? The innkeeper shook his head, his eyes narrowing with a mix of pity and resignation. There's no stopping them, but there might be a way to make them hesitate. You need to find someone who understands the old ways, someone who can translate that book, guide you through the layers of its meaning. There's a woman, Agnes MacLeod, lives in a cabin deep in the hills near Loch Coruisk. She's one of the last of the old ones, those who still know the stories and the magic that's been forgotten. Finn nodded, determination slowly replacing the fear gnawing at him. Loch Coruisk. How far? 2 days' walk, maybe less if you're quick. But be careful, lad. The Watchers won't be far behind. The innkeeper's words haunted Finn as he left the village early the next morning. The landscape stretched out before him, wild and untouched, but now it felt different, alive with unseen eyes and hidden forces. The weight of the book in his pack was a constant reminder of the path he had chosen and the unknown dangers that now lurked in the shadows. By midday, the sky had darkened with clouds, and the wind had picked up, whipping through the heather. Finn moved quickly, his eyes scanning the horizon for any sign of movement. The Watchers. The very idea of them sent shivers down his spine. Who were they? What did they want with the book? And what would they do to him if they caught him? As the hours passed, the rugged terrain of the highlands grew more treacherous. Finn crossed streams, climbed rocky slopes, and navigated dense patches of forest, the weight of exhaustion settling in his bones. But every time he considered stopping, the urgency of his situation pushed him forward. It was late afternoon when he finally crested a ridge and saw it, Loch Coruisk, a dark, glassy expanse of water nestled between steep cliffs and jagged peaks. The landscape here felt ancient, untouched by time. In the distance, perched on the edge of the loch, was a small stone cabin, smoke rising from its chimney. Agnes MacLeod. Finn's heart quickened as he made his way down the slope toward the cabin. But as he approached, a sense of unease settled over him. The air felt thicker here, charged with an energy he couldn't explain. And then he saw them, faint shadows at the edges of his vision, flickering just beyond the trees. The Watchers. They were here. Panic surged through him, and Finn quickened his pace, his breath coming in short, ragged gasps. He had to reach Agnes before they caught up with him. The shadows seemed to move in rhythm with his steps, growing bolder, closer. He could almost hear the faint hum of their presence, like a whisper carried on the wind. Finally, he reached the cabin door and pounded on it desperately. "Agnes, please! I need your help!" For a moment, there was no response, just the eerie silence of the surrounding landscape. But then the door creaked open, and an old woman with sharp, piercing eyes stood before him. She wore a simple woolen cloak, her silver hair pulled back in a braid. Despite her age, there was an undeniable strength in her presence. "You've brought trouble with you," Agnes said, her voice calm but firm. Finn nodded, panting. "I found something. A book. The innkeeper said you could help me understand it." Agnes glanced over his shoulder at the shadows creeping through the trees, then stepped aside, motioning for him to enter. Quickly, before they get any closer, Finn rushed inside, the warmth of the hearth hitting him like a wave. As soon as the door closed behind him, Agnes moved to the window, her eyes scanning the darkening forest. "They won't wait long," she muttered. "You've awakened something that hasn't stirred for centuries. The Watchers are relentless, and once they've marked you, they won't stop." Finn swallowed hard. "What do they want?" Agnes turned to him, her expression grave. "They want the book, and they want to make sure no one unlocks its secrets." Finn reached into his pack and pulled out the ancient tome, setting it on the table between them. Agnes stared at it for a long moment, her fingers tracing the symbols on the cover. Then she looked up at him. "You don't understand what you found, do you?" Finn shook his head. "No, but I need to. I need to know why they're after it." Agnes sighed deeply, her eyes softening with a mix of sadness and determination. "This book? It's not just a relic of the past. It's a gateway, a link to powers that have been forgotten, buried by time and by those who feared them. The Watchers have guarded these secrets for centuries, ensuring they remain hidden from the world. But now, by taking the book, you've started something that can't be undone." Finn felt a chill run down his spine. What do I do now? Agnes, gaze hardened. You follow the path to its end. But be warned, once you open the book fully, there's no turning back. You'll have to face the truth and the consequences that come with it. Finn looked at the book, his mind racing. The Watchers were closing in. Whatever lay ahead, he had no choice but to see it through. I'm ready, he said, his voice steady. Agnes nodded, her expression unreadable. Then we begin. Chapter 6. The Unveiling of Secrets. Agnes moved with deliberate care, gathering items from the shelves of her small cabin, candles, stones, and a bowl filled with herbs that Finn didn't recognize. As she placed them on the table, surrounding the ancient book, Finn felt a growing tension in the air. The cabin was small and warm, but the shadows from outside seemed to press against the walls, as if waiting for their moment. The Watchers. Do they want the book because it holds something dangerous? Finn asked, his voice a low murmur. His gaze shifted between Agnes and the door, where the faint flicker of movement outside sent a cold shiver down his spine. Not exactly, Agnes replied without looking up. The book itself is not inherently dangerous. It's what it can reveal that scares them. Knowledge, power buried by the ages. The Watchers have long guarded against anyone who might use that power again. They fear what might happen if someone opens the door to the past. She lit the candles one by one, her hands steady and precise. But they were not just trying to protect the world from you, Finn. They're also protecting their hold on these secrets. They've lived in the shadows for centuries, and this is how they stay in control. Finn sat down across from her, the weight of the moment pressing in on him. What if I don't want that power? What if I just want to understand what I've found? Agnes paused and looked him straight in the eyes. Understanding is the first step toward using it. You can't unsee the truth once it's revealed. And whether you intend to use it or not, the knowledge will change you. That's why they're coming for you. Once you open the book fully, they won't allow you to walk away. Finn's heart hammered in his chest. The book felt heavier now, as if it held more than just ancient writings, like it carried the weight of the world on its pages. But he had come this far. He had faced the strange figure, the whispers in the bothy, and now the Watchers were closing in. There was no turning back. Let's open it, Finn said, his voice firm. Agnes nodded solemnly. Very well. But know this, you are stepping into something far older than you can imagine. The book is not just a key, it's a map, guiding you towards something hidden deep within these lands, something only a few have ever glimpsed. She took a deep breath and began to speak in a language Finn didn't recognize. Her voice, low and rhythmic. The candles flickered as the air inside the cabin seemed to thicken. The symbols on the cover of the book shimmered faintly, and Finn felt a pull, as if the book was coming alive under Agnes' incantation. Slowly, the book opened on its own, the pages flipping until they landed on the one that had been glowing faintly the night before. The strange glyphs now seemed sharper, clearer, and Finn could feel something tugging at the edge of his consciousness. His mind raced with questions, but one overwhelmed them all. What was this leading him to? Agnes leaned in close, studying the symbols with the practiced eye of someone who had spent her life deciphering ancient texts. She traced the lines on the page with her fingertip, murmuring under her breath as if in conversation with the book itself. These symbols? They point to a place, a very specific place, she said, her voice tight with concentration. An ancient site, hidden deep within the mountains. The ancestors called it the heart of the Highlands. If the book is correct, that's where the true power lies, where the veil between worlds is at its thinnest. Finn's stomach twisted. And I have to go there, don't I? Agnes looked up, her eyes grave. You do. The book has chosen you to reveal the path, and once the path is opened, you'll need to decide whether to cross it or not. But be warned, the Watchers will try to stop you before you reach the heart. They'll throw everything they have at you. Finn's pulse quickened. The idea of facing the Watchers, these shadowy beings he still didn't fully understand, terrified him. But there was no turning back now. Not after everything he had seen. Is there a way to fight them? He asked. There's no fighting them as you'd fight any mortal enemy, Agnes said, her voice steady. But there are ways to ward them off, to slow them down. The book itself is part of that protection. They fear what it represents, but the closer you get to the heart, the more desperate they'll become. Agnes took out a small pouch and handed it to Finn. Inside, he found a handful of smooth stones engraved with intricate designs. These will help you along the way. They're old symbols of protection. Lay them around your camp at night, and they'll keep the Watchers at bay for a time. Finn nodded, tucking the stones into his pocket. His mind was racing. The heart of the Highlands, a place where the veil between worlds was thin. It sounded impossible, but then again, everything about this journey had defied logic and reason. The strange figure, the carvings in the bothy, the whispering voice, each piece of the puzzle had drawn him deeper into something he barely understood. Agnes stood and grabbed a rough map from the shelf. She spread it across the table and traced her finger along a winding path through the highlands, pointing to a spot high in the mountains. This is where you'll find it. It's a 2-day hike from here, through rough terrain. But once you're there, you'll know. Finn stared at the map, committing the path to memory. The journey ahead seemed daunting, but the pull of the mystery was stronger than his fear. Whatever was at the heart of the highlands, it was waiting for him. "Thank you," Finn said quietly. Agnes nodded, her face lined with worry. "Be careful, Finn. You're walking a path that many have feared to tread. The Watchers will stop at nothing to protect their secrets." Finn stood, pulling his pack onto his shoulders, the book still tucked securely inside. He took a deep breath and stepped toward the door. "Good luck," Agnes said softly as he opened it. The wind howled outside, the night sky lit only by the dim glow of a half moon. The trees rustled ominously, and somewhere in the distance, Finn thought he saw the faint flicker of movement, shadowy figures watching him, waiting for his next move. He gripped the strap of his pack and set off into the dark, his heart pounding with both fear and anticipation. The heart of the Highlands was calling, and with each step he took, he knew he was walking deeper into the unknown. Chapter 7. The Heart of the Highlands. The next morning, Finn set off early, the weight of the ancient book heavy in his pack. Agnes had warned him of the dangers ahead, but there was no turning back now. The sky above was a dull gray, and the wind cut through the mountains like a whispering force, pushing him onward toward the mysterious heart of the Highlands. The terrain was rough, unforgiving. Steep ridges and jagged rock faces loomed on either side as he hiked deeper into the wilderness, far beyond any marked trail. He relied on the map Agnes had given him, but even that seemed vague, as though the path itself was constantly shifting beneath his feet. With every step, Finn could feel a growing tension in the air, as if something was watching him from the shadows. He couldn't see the Watchers, but he knew they were there, lurking just out of sight. By midday, the clouds above grew darker, and the wind picked up, howling across the open ridges. Finn's breath came in short, ragged bursts as he scrambled over a particularly steep outcrop of rock. His legs ached from the climb, but he pressed on, driven by the pull of the book and the urgency of what lay ahead. As the sun dipped lower, the landscape around him began to change. The rugged hills gave way to an eerie silence. The wind died down, and the only sound was the soft crunch of his boots on the rocky ground. It was as if the land itself was holding its breath, waiting. Finn knew he was close. He could feel it in his bones, in the way the air seemed to hum with energy. The heart of the Highlands was near. He rounded a bend in the path, and there it was, an ancient stone circle, half buried in the earth, hidden deep in the mountains. The stones were tall, weathered by time, their surfaces etched with the same strange glyphs he had seen in the bothy. They pulsed faintly, almost as if they were alive. Finn's breath caught in his throat. This was it, the place the book had been leading him to. But he wasn't alone. From the shadows at the edge of the circle, figures began to emerge, dark, flickering shapes that seemed to shift in and out of reality. The Watchers. They surrounded the stone circle, their forms barely visible against the darkening sky. Their presence sent a cold shiver down Finn's spine, but he didn't move. One of the Watchers stepped forward, its form more solid than the others. It spoke in a voice that sounded like wind through the trees, ancient and cold. "You should not have come here." Finn swallowed hard, his heart pounding. "I need to understand. The book led me here?" "The book was never meant for you," the Watcher replied, its voice laced with an ancient authority. "It belongs to the old world, and its secrets must remain hidden. Turn back now, or you will face the consequences. Finn stood his ground, his fingers tightening around the strap of his pack. I can't turn back. I've come this far. I need to know the truth. The Watcher's eyes, or what passed for eyes, glowed faintly in the dim light. The truth is dangerous. It has destroyed many before you. Finn reached into his pack and pulled out the book. It felt warm in his hands, the symbols on the cover glowing faintly in response to the energy of the stone circle. I'm not here to use the power. I just need to understand it, to know why it's been hidden. The Watcher stepped closer, its shadowy form towering over him. Understanding comes with a price, mortal. The knowledge you seek is not meant for your kind. It will change you, and once you have opened the door, you cannot close it again. Finn's heart pounded in his chest, but he felt the pull of the book, the urge to open it fully, to let it guide him. His entire journey had led to this moment, and now, standing at the edge of an ancient mystery, he knew there was no turning back. With trembling hands, he opened the book. The pages turned on their own, glowing with a brilliant light that filled the entire circle. The symbols on the stones began to pulse in rhythm with the pages, and a low hum filled the air, growing louder with each passing second. The Watchers stood at the edge of the circle, watching in silence. As the final page turned, the light from the book flared, blinding Finn momentarily. When his vision cleared, he saw it at the center of the circle. A portal had opened, shimmering like a mirror of water suspended in the air. Beyond it, he could see another world, vast and ancient, filled with landscapes that defied description. Mountains rose higher than any he had ever seen, and strange lights flickered across the sky. This was the heart of the Highlands, the place where the veil between worlds was thinnest. Finn's breath caught in his throat. The knowledge, the power, it was all here, waiting for him to step through. But the Watchers moved now, closing in, their forms shifting and darkening. "Do not cross," the lead Watcher hissed, its voice filled with an ancient menace. "To step through is to abandon all that you know." Finn hesitated, his heart pounding. The portal shimmered before him, and he could feel its pull, inviting, enticing. It offered answers, understanding, everything he had been searching for. But the Watchers? Warning echoed in his mind. He had come this far, but was he ready to leave everything behind? Could he face the unknown, knowing that it would change him forever? His hand hovered at the edge of the portal, his mind racing, and then with a deep breath, he stepped forward. The moment his foot crossed the threshold, the world around him seemed to explode in light. The Watchers screamed, their forms dissolving into shadows as the portal engulfed him, pulling him into the unknown. The air was electric, the world spinning around him. Colors and shapes blurred together as he was drawn deeper into the otherworldly realm, his senses overwhelmed by the sheer force of it all. And then suddenly, everything went still. Finn found himself standing on the other side. The landscape was breathtaking, an endless expanse of mountains and valleys, shimmering with a light that seemed to come from the land itself. The air was crisp and cold, filled with the scent of something ancient, something untouched. And at the center of it all stood a great stone tower, rising impossibly high into the sky. Finn's breath caught in his throat. This was it. The heart of the Highlands, the place where the ancient powers had been hidden for centuries. As he stood there, staring up at the tower, a voice echoed in his mind, soft but powerful. "Welcome, Finn. You have found the truth?" Finn closed his eyes, the weight of the journey settling over him. The truth was here, waiting for him, but it was a truth that would change him and the world forever. Chapter 8. The Price of Knowledge. The cold wind whipped around Finn as he stood before the towering structure, its ancient stones glowing with a faint, otherworldly light. His heart raced with anticipation and fear. The heart of the Highlands was far more than he had ever imagined, and as the voice echoed in his mind, he couldn't shake the feeling that this place was alive, watching his every move. He took a hesitant step forward, his boots crunching softly on the frozen ground. The landscape around him felt dreamlike, the distant mountains shimmering as if caught between two realities. The air was thick with a strange energy that made his skin tingle, and every step toward the tower felt like a step deeper into the unknown. Finn's hand tightened around the strap of his pack, where the book lay nestled against his back. Its weight was a constant reminder of the journey that had brought him here. and the ancient secrets it still held. He could feel it pulsing faintly, like a living thing, urging him forward. As he approached the base of the tower, he saw that it wasn't just a simple structure. The stones were covered in the same intricate glyphs that had been carved into the walls of the bothy. Only these were more elaborate, their lines flowing and intertwining in patterns that seemed to shift and change as he looked at them. The symbols felt alive, pulsing with a rhythm that resonated deep within him. Finn reached out and placed his hand on the stone. The moment his skin touched it, a surge of energy coursed through him, powerful and overwhelming. His vision blurred, and suddenly he was no longer standing in the highlands. He was floating. The world around him dissolved into light and color, swirling in a kaleidoscope of images that flashed before his eyes. Ancient battles, forgotten rituals, civilizations rising and falling. The weight of history pressed down on him, as if he were experiencing centuries of knowledge in a single moment. The past, the present, and the future seemed to merge into one, and Finn felt as though he were being pulled apart, his mind unraveling under the strain. But amidst the chaos, a voice spoke. It was the same voice that had whispered to him at the bothy, but now it was clearer, stronger. You have sought the truth, and now it is yours. Finn's vision snapped back into focus, and he found himself standing in a vast hall. The walls were lined with more glyphs, their light flickering like flames. At the far end of the hall stood a figure cloaked in shadow, tall and imposing. Finn couldn't make out any details of its face, but he could feel its gaze upon him, sharp and unyielding. "Who are you?" Finn asked, his voice trembling. The figure stepped forward, the sound of its movements echoing in the hall. "I am the keeper of the heart," it said, its voice deep and resonant. "I guard the knowledge that has been hidden here for millennia." Finn took a cautious step closer, his mind racing. What is this place? What is the heart of the Highlands? The keeper's gaze bore into him. This is the source of the old power, the forgotten wisdom of the ancients. Long ago, this world was connected to others' realms beyond your understanding. The heart is a bridge between these worlds, a place where the boundaries between realities are thin. Finn's mind reeled. A bridge between worlds? It sounded impossible, but everything he had experienced so far had defied logic and reason. He glanced at the glyphs on the walls, their shifting patterns calling to him. And the book, what is its purpose? The book, the keeper said slowly, is a key. It unlocks the gateway between worlds, but it is also a guide. It contains the knowledge of those who came before you, those who sought to control the power of the heart. Finn's hand instinctively went to the book in his pack. Why was it hidden? Why did the Watchers try to stop me? The keeper's voice darkened. The Watchers were once like you, seekers of knowledge, but they were consumed by their desire for power. They wished to use the heart for their own ends, to reshape the world in their image. When they failed, they became its guardians, swearing to keep its secrets from those who might follow in their footsteps. Finn's breath hitched. So they don't want to protect the world from danger, they want to control the power for themselves. Precisely, the keeper said. They fear that someone will succeed where they failed. Finn felt a chill run down his spine. What happens if I use the power? The keeper was silent for a long moment, the air thick with tension. The power of the heart is not meant for the faint of heart. To use it is to become a part of it, to be bound to its will. The world as you know it will change, and so will you. It is not a gift, but a burden. Finn's mind raced. He had come here seeking answers, but now the weight of those answers was crushing him. He thought of everything Agnes had told him, of the Watchers who were still out there, waiting for him to falter. And yet, standing here, at the center of it all, he couldn't turn away. What happens if I refuse? He asked, his voice barely above a whisper. The keeper stepped closer, its shadow looming over him. If you refuse, the heart will remain as it has for millennia untouched, its power locked away. But the Watchers will never stop hunting you. They will pursue you until the book is returned to them, and even then, they will not let you live. Finn's chest tightened. The choices before him seemed impossible. To take the power was to lose himself, to become something else entirely. But to walk away was to live in fear, hunted by those who would stop at nothing to silence him. The keeper's gaze never wavered. The choice is yours, Finn. But know this, once you make it, there is no going back. Finn stood in silence, his heart pounding in his chest. The power of the heart, the weight of the ancient knowledge, the looming threat of the Watchers, it all pressed down on him, threatening to crush him under its weight. But in that moment, he knew what he had to do. With a deep breath, Finn stepped forward and placed his hand on the stone pedestal at the center of the hall. The glyphs flared to life, brighter than ever before, and the air crackled with energy. "I choose to take the power," Finn said, his voice steady, though fear still gnawed at him. "But I will not use it for the same reasons the Watchers did. I will protect this knowledge. I will guard it." The keeper watched him closely, and for the first time, Finn thought he saw something like approval in its shadowed face. "So be it." The moment the words were spoken, the hall erupted in light. The energy of the heart surged through Finn, filling him with a power so immense it nearly brought him to his knees. The glyphs blazed around him, their ancient symbols searing into his mind. He could feel the knowledge of the ancients flowing into him, their secrets becoming a part of him. And then, as suddenly as it had begun, the light faded, and the world grew still. Finn stood alone in the vast hall, the weight of the heart's power now coursing through him. He could feel it, an ancient force, deep and unfathomable, bound to him. But he was still Finn. The keeper bowed its head. "You are now the guardian of the heart. The knowledge is yours to protect." Finn nodded, his body still trembling with the power he now held. He knew that his journey wasn't over. The Watchers would still come for him. But now he was ready. With the heart's power at his side, he would face whatever came next. Chapter 9. The Watcher's Last Move. The keeper's form shimmered briefly before fading into the stone walls, leaving Finn alone in the great hall. The air crackled with the lingering energy of the heart, and Finn could feel it humming deep within him, a steady pulse that resonated with the ancient power he now held. His mind was clearer, sharper, filled with knowledge that had once been hidden from the world. He had become the guardian, but with that power came a responsibility that weighed heavily on him. For a long moment, Finn stood in silence, absorbing the gravity of what had happened. The glyphs on the walls no longer shifted chaotically, but instead seemed to move with purpose, responding to his presence. He could sense the vast history locked within each symbol, stories of civilizations that had come and gone, of people who had sought the power of the heart and failed. And yet, Finn had succeeded. But as the keeper had warned, the Watchers were not finished with him. They had pursued this knowledge for centuries, and now that it was bound to Finn, they would come for him, more desperate, more dangerous than ever before. Finn took a deep breath, his mind focused. He needed to prepare. With the heart's power now within him, he felt a new confidence, but he knew that facing the Watchers would not be easy. They were ancient, relentless, and ruthless. He closed the book, the once impenetrable symbols now clear to him. The weight of its knowledge had shifted. It no longer felt like a burden, but a part of him. With the book securely tucked into his pack, Finn turned toward the exit of the great hall. The portal shimmered at the edge of the room, waiting for him to step through and return to the world he had left behind. As he crossed the threshold, the world seemed to shift around him once again. The ancient hall dissolved, and he found himself back in the highlands, standing at the center of the stone circle. The sun was low on the horizon, casting long shadows over the land. The wind had picked up, colder now, and in the distance, the mountains stood like silent sentinels, watching over the land. But something had changed. The Watchers were closer. Finn could feel their presence even before he saw them. The air was heavy, with the sense of something ancient and malevolent drawing near. He turned slowly, scanning the landscape, and there, emerging from the shadows of the hills, they came. Dark, flickering figures, their forms barely visible against the dim light of the evening. The Watchers were no longer hiding. They were making their move. Finn's heart pounded in his chest, but he forced himself to remain calm. The heart's power flowed through him, steady and strong. He was no longer just a traveler, no longer a seeker of knowledge. He was the guardian now, and the ancient force that had once eluded the Watchers was his to command. The figures advanced slowly, their movements unnaturally fluid, as if they were gliding across the ground rather than walking. The lead Watcher, the one who had spoken to Finn at the stone circle, stepped forward, its shadowy form shifting in the dying light. "You were warned?" The Watcher's voice hissed, cold and menacing. "You should have left the heart untouched." Finn stood his ground, his eyes locked on the Watcher. "You don't understand. I didn't take the power to control it. I took it to protect it from you." The Watcher's form rippled, its shadowy edges blurring. "Protect it? You are a fool. The power of the heart is not something you can wield. It will consume you, as it has consumed others before you." Finn felt the power within him respond to the Watcher's threat. The glyphs on the stones around him began to pulse faintly, their light reflecting the energy he now held. He took a deep breath, steadying himself. "I won't let you have it," Finn said, his voice firm. "You and the Watchers have kept this power hidden for too long. The world deserves to know the truth, but I won't let you twist it for your own ends." The Watcher's eyes, or what passed for eyes, narrowed. "Then you will die with it." In an instant, the Watchers attacked. The air around Finn seemed to grow colder, and the ground beneath his feet trembled as the shadowy figures closed in, moving faster than before. Their forms flickered and shifted, making it hard to track their movements, but Finn could feel the power of the heart rising within him, guiding him. He closed his eyes for a brief moment, focusing on the energy that flowed through him. The ancient knowledge, the hidden wisdom of the book, it was all there, waiting to be unleashed. And as the Watchers descended upon him, he opened his eyes, ready to defend the heart. With a single thought, the glyphs on the stones around him flared to life. Bright, radiant light burst forth, surrounding Finn in a protective circle. The Watchers recoiled, their forms flickering wildly in the face of the sudden power. The light was not just a barrier, it was ancient magic, the same force that had protected the heart for centuries. The lead Watcher let out a furious hiss, its form distorting as it struggled to press forward. "You cannot stop us? We are eternal." But Finn knew better. The heart's power was not something that could be controlled by fear or force. It responded to the will of those who sought to protect, not to dominate. He raised his hand, the energy of the heart coursing through his veins. The ground beneath the stone circle trembled, and the glyphs on the stones pulsed with a rhythm that matched the beating of his heart. The Watchers were strong, but the heart's power was stronger. With a surge of energy, Finn sent a wave of light outward, sweeping across the landscape like a storm. The Watchers cried out as the light engulfed them, their forms dissolving into shadows as they were driven back. One by one, they faded, their cries lost in the wind. The lead Watcher, the last to remain, stared at Finn with a look of hatred and fury. "This is not over," it hissed. "We will return. The heart will be ours." And then, with a final flicker, it was gone. The silence that followed was deafening. Finn stood alone in the stone circle, the wind howling softly through the highland valleys. The light from the glyphs slowly faded, leaving the stones cold and still once more. But Finn knew the battle wasn't truly over. The Watchers had been driven back, but they would return. They would always seek the heart, and now that he was its guardian, they would always seek him. He knelt beside one of the stones, placing his hand on its surface. The ancient glyphs no longer felt foreign to him. They were a part of him now, a part of the knowledge he had been chosen to protect. The heart of the Highlands was safe, for now, but Finn knew that the real challenge lay ahead. The world was changing, and with the knowledge of the ancients flowing through him, he had become a part of that change. He stood, gazing out over the vast, wild landscape of the Highlands, knowing that his journey was far from over. The heart had chosen him, and now it was his to protect, no matter the cost. The end.